All right. Yo, what's going on, guys? We got Matt McManus here today. We will see. Let's see if I can get the audio right on here. Typically, Matt, I just upgraded to a new microphone, and it has been a pain in the fucking ass to dial this thing down. So, chat, everything sound good? Everything sound okay? Matt, does everything sound good on your end, anyways, as well?
It sounds good to me, man.
Hell yes. Okay. All right. So what's going on, man? What have you been up to? We were talking a little bit earlier before stream started, but yeah, how's life?
I'm pretty fucking bored. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you know, when this whole thing began about a year ago, I figured, wow, it'll be like 5, 6 months or something like that. And the other day, I was watching a movie with my wife, and it was fucking mind-boggling because I was just watching it and being like, what are these people doing outside, and why are they like hugging and all that stuff? And I realized that I've started to internalize this lifestyle,
Yeah.
where the idea of physical contact with another human being seems a little weird.
Yeah,
So
man.
I'm like, oh, this is gotta end.
Yeah, like you'll watch movies and shit with people are not wearing masks and stuff like that. And you're like, holy fuck, dude.
Right?
They're like in groups of in crowds of people, and they're just like they're going along like everything's normal. No, I feel that completely. It's really weird. It's really weird times. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Fucking what was I watching? Watch this movie with Russell Brand and Jonah Hill. It was on Netflix called Get Them to the Greek. Basically, it's like a fucking drinking comedy road trip film. It's pretty funny, but long story short, like they were at a bar and they were all partying, and I was just like, man, I remember when we used to do things like that. We'd go to bars, we'd meet friends. One day.
Yeah. So, all right. So I actually have I'm plugging your book right here, guys. I'm pretty sure all of you guys in chat know who Matt McManus is, but author of What is Postmodern Conservatism? Essays on Our Hugely Tremendous Times. I actually got it right here, Matt. I have not read it. I have not read it yet, so forgive me on that end, but I have.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I know, my fault. But no, for real, since I started this YouTube channel, dude, holy fuck, the immense amount of just stacks of books that I like, because that's kind of like my thing. Like I try to translate text, philosophical text, books of theory into video form. And I'm so sorry, man. I haven't even fucking reached like 1/3 of like prior historical like theorists and shit like that.
Oh, don't worry about it at all. Honestly, I get a lot of people who send me shit to read at this point, and I feel bad because I can't look at like a fucking half of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm usually just like, oh, it looks good. Fair enough. If there was enough time for us to read everything that's worth reading, then we'd all wind up being 600, right?
150%, dude. So it was interesting. So like I think a lot of my chat is pretty well acquainted with postmodern conservatism as a whole. What do you have you so something that I've noticed, like I think the idea of pinning down theoretically something like postmodern conservatism's kind of like, honestly, dude, like bravo, it's kind of genius, because I think that's the one thing a lot of people have noticed is that, like, Jesus fucking Christ, like it is the quote unquote, conservatives that are this new postmodern entity in today's world. And I was wondering where you sort of like kind of really concretely pin that down, because I know you did some writing about Jordan Peterson, and I find Jordan Peterson to be ironically like pretty kind of postmodern in some ways, right? So I'm
in some ways, yeah, we can definitely talk about that if you want. But I was just gonna say, one of the most fucking amazing things about this book was people liked it and all that kind of stuff. But after the Capitol Hill riots, where the QAnon shaman just fucking bailed into the Senate wearing that big buffalo outfit, right? I just got barrages of emails and people tweeting at me being like, we guess you're right.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, a lot of these far right douchebags prove my point better than I ever could.
I mean? Absolutely. I mean, was there a lot of like pushback on the idea of something like postmodern conservatism? Because it makes perfect fucking sense to me.
Yeah, initially, right? And to your question more seriously, right? kind of roots of the whole project go back to, I guess, around late 2015, 2016. So I was finishing my PhD, and I was also working as a door-to-door salesman to make ends meet, as one does in grad school now. And I was following the election, the U.S. election, pretty closely with me and my buddies, because Canada, U.S., American politics is basically a spectator sport.
100%.
And we all got a little bit concerned when it looked like Donald Trump was actually going to clinch the Republican nomination. But full disclosure, none of us actually expected him to win. And I'm never going to forget this evening in 2016, where myself and my buddies were all hanging around at my apartment, which includes all the people from the Pill Pod, by the way, those of you who listen to us. Victor and Pills and Eric.
I think Victor told me the story.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were watching the election, and all of us were like, I wonder how much she's going to win by. And we were doing the typical leftist, like, well, the minute she's in office, we're going to have to start putting pressure on the Dems. Not that they're going to listen, neoliberal this and neoliberal that. And then just by the end of the night, everybody was fucking in tears, right? Just like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? I've opened a bottle of whiskey that I was saving for a special occasion because I was like, it's just needed now. We need some kind of anesthetic.
Right. I don't think I remember so clearly, and I'm sure people in chat and all over that are listening, but like, do you remember the day after the US election? Like, I remember it clear as day, the way that I felt. Like, it was terrible. Like, it was just it was I've never felt that way in my entire life ever. That was the only day I have felt. It was this really weird sort of like confused anxiety. It wasn't like total anxiety because nothing was immediately threatening you, right? But it was like this weird, like, I've never felt that way ever since that day after Donald Trump won. And I know some like, the Twitter shit, like, oh, we got Trump deranged syndrome or some shit. But no, for real, like, it was the weirdest thing because there were so many question marks and so many unknowns that, it was terrible.
Oh, it was bizarre. And I even know some conservatives who later came to support Trump who actually described it as surreal, right? Because you kind of sit there and you think, oh, there's this reality TV president who's had several wives and who's probably slept around with all kinds of sleazy people. And now he's president of the United States and he's going to have the nuclear codes. Well, how about that? And beyond all the kind of odd, funny elements of this, there was something that was deeply disturbing about it, right? Now, I know that there are a lot of people who are prone to calling Trump a fascist, and I can certainly understand the temptation to do so. I push back on that thesis a little bit, and we can talk about that if you want to know why.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I kind of got the sense that at the time, it wasn't really sensible to apply a concept or a political terminology that was really situated in early 20th century European context. And apply it kind of ad hoc to what was going on now. So what I did after 2016 was decide that I really need to start taking the political right more seriously and delve more deeply into its history. So one of the things that I did was basically start by going back to the beginning. I cracked open my old copy of Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, went through some of his stuff on the Sublime and the Beautiful. And what I noticed about the problems with Enlightenment, like reason, how it is that essentially elitist Western philosophers thought that they knew everything and felt they should run the world as a consequence of that, why it is that we need to understand truth and truth claims, especially moral truth claims, in local and historical context. It echoed a lot of stuff some of the Pomo theorists that I had read back in the day were saying. Albeit with a very kind of different political implication, right? So that's around the time where I got the genesis of the idea. And the first way that I kind of cashed this out was in a paper that was published for the International Journal of Zizek Studies. I'm a fan, and I kind of gave it a bit of a Zizek ideology studies type take. But then I published a series of magazine articles on postmodern conservatism, each one kind of building the argument a little bit further. And the reception was pretty invested, right? People seemed to like it or be interested in the idea. So that's when I decided to release my 2 books on the subject. One is the more academic monograph, The Rise of Postmodern Conservatism for Palgrave Macmillan. Then there's the collection of essays you mentioned for 0 books.
Yeah, gotcha. So, you said that you don't think Trump is a fascist, and you think it's a mistake to label him as that. It's actually kind of funny. Maybe this is lazy language on my part. I actually kind of think Donald Trump fits. I absolutely see the massive differences in actual traditional theoretical, like the more academic end of fascism, which a lot of people today don't even realize existed. Like fascism was a super intellectual thing in the early 20th century. But
Yes.
I have considered Trump like a fascist, but mainly like a newborn sort of neo-fascist. What? So, would you consider Trump like anywhere near like the fascist like realm of things, or do you think neo-fascist is probably more appropriate, or what are the very things about Trump that you think are very distinctly like, yeah, we can't call this guy a fascist at all?
Oh, I think there are a huge number of elective affinities between Trumpism and fascism,
Hmm.
right? Not least of which is the transformation of politics into a kind of hyperreal spectacle, right?
Mm,
A lot of people mistakenly associate fascism with a purely nostalgic return to older ways of doing things. And you can think about, the Nazis' appeals to things like the Second and the First Reich, or Mussolini's appeals to creating a new Roman Empire, right?
right.
But as Walter Benjamin and other critical theorists will point out, there was a very modern edge to fascism as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Particularly the kind of eroticization or fetishization of military technology and the associated sense of strength that came with that, but also in their turn to the most modern and technically advanced kinds of entertainment that were available at the time, right? Um, you know, the Nazis were hugely invested, for instance, in producing German cinema and poured unbelievable amounts of money into it, along with radio. The same was true of Mussolini. And Walter Benjamin analyzes this and says, look, one of the reasons they're doing this is fascism is primarily an affective way of looking at the world, right? It breaks very stridently from the contours of Western rationalism. And the kind of politics that you see associated with that are consequently affective, but they're also about entertainment, right? Fascism is a society that turns itself into a kind of very dark entertainment, since, of course, nothing is more sublime uh, in a certain sense than war, right?
Right.
Nothing fills your attention more than that. And the reason why I think that Trump isn't a fascist isn't because there are no correlations between what he's doing and these traditional fascist movements. I think there absolutely are, in just the way that I was describing, right?
Hmm.
Trumpism is very much a kind of hyper real approach to politics. It's intended to be deeply entertaining,
Uh-huh.
in the sense of you can't look away. And I think it's successful at that. It appeals to affect, very strongly associated with various kinds of identitarian movements and all the resentments that you would associate with that. The one place where I think it reaches from fascism, and I think this is key, and Richard Evans wrote a good article about this recently, Cambridge historian who focuses on Nazism, which is that Trumpism isn't particularly militaristic, right? Both Nazism and Italian fascism and the minor fascist movements were really focused on this idea of using martial power to remake the European order and thence the world, right?
Hmm.
In the image of the super Germanic state or the new Roman Empire, right? And we
Right.
never really saw that with Trumpism, right? Trumpism, by contrast, was isolationist. It occasionally appealed to militaristic rhetoric, and Trump, of course, created the Space Force and invested more billions of more dollars in the U.S. military. Um, it never engaged in the kind of world restructuring ambitions and programs that we would associate with classical fascism, right? And I see this as important enough that we need to distinguish between these conventional forms of fascism and postmodern conservative Trumpism, even though they share a lot of affinities with one another.
Right. So I think like I think a big thing that I got from that is that we can probably undersell the deeply I mean we do this with a lot of politics, right? We do this with even people like Stalin, but we undersell the deeply ingrained ideological tonality, right? So for example, someone like Stalin, people say that he's just this just dictator, this power hungry person. No, Stalin was a very dedicated Marxist in so many ways. Like he wasn't just power hungry for the sake of power, like we say. Same with Hitler, right? And then with Trump, there's this sort of you know, and with Trump, the difference being is there's this like sort of anti-ideological tonality, right? Is that sort of what you're kind of saying? This like this hyper real spectacle of a president.
Well, I think we need to be careful here, right? You're absolutely right to say that Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler both had a more self-conscious conception of what they were trying to achieve than Donald Trump, right? And they were also more ideologically invested in their projects, right? I don't think there's any kind of doubt about that.
Sure.
And you're also right to say that both Nazism and Italian fascism had a intellectual quality to them. Right? I mean, it's no coincidence that Nazism was able to attract people like Martin Heidegger or Carl Schmitt into its ranks, or that Italian fascism drew heavily on things like futurism or Nietzsche to provide a kind of ideological justification for these projects, right? Saying that, it's not like Trumpism doesn't have its intellectual defenders either, right? Now, Trumpism as a form of right-wing populism has a certainly pronounced anti-intellectual edge, right? But like most kinds of right-wing populism and conservatism generally, this anti-intellectual edge is always subordinated to the strategic need to actually have certain kinds of intellectual justifications to wage political combat at a relatively high level, right? So you saw the emergence during the Trump era of various Trumpist intellectuals, people like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson. You can also point to people like Sohrab Ahmari, right? Now, I don't think any of the arguments these people put forward justifying various Trumpy positions are particularly compelling, right? In fact, I don't really think they're compelling at all, right? But they do try to serve the ideological function of providing an intellectual defense of Trumpism.
Right.
Now, when I call Trumpism hyper-real, what I mean is in the precise Baudrillardian sense of that, right? Which is that earlier forms of politics in liberal democracies, particularly during the neoliberal era, tended to be very much grounded in material concerns, right? And this was actually a subject of great critiques by various Marxist philosophers at the end of the 20th century, right? That what we really see people like Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, all the way through to Obama trying to do is consciously restructure the global economic order to insulate capital from democratic pressures, right?
Yeah.
And with Trumpism, there's this stark shift towards a politics that doesn't even have a tangential connection to material concerns any longer, except insofar as they serve a symbolic role in what's ultimately this very identity-driven, culturally anxious kind of political agitation.
Does I was sorry, I don't mean to. I was gonna say, doesn't that's to me? I was gonna go ahead and point out. I was gonna see if what you thought about this. Doesn't that sort of seem like a weird new neo-fascism though? That's what I typically get. There is something. I find the some of the most prevalent things about fascism is actually sort of like a hyper real symbolic thing, right? This mysticism of a unified Europe, or back in the better days, this sort of especially in European fascism, where it's like this white nationalism. It seems like already, granted, like you said, it was much more materially and ideologically focused back then, but it seems like that hyper real entity, that idealism was already there, right? And it seems that Trump feeds on that a lot.
Sure. And I mean, again, I think there are remarkable affinities between Trumpism and fascism, right? In more respects than just one. I think you can also draw some tremendous historical parallels between the rise of Trump and the rise of various fascist parties early in the 20th century. People like Timothy Snyder have done a great job of this, right? Jason Stanley as well, who I interviewed not too long ago. Again, I think the only respect in which I am reticent to apply the fascist label to Trump isn't because of a lot of his domestic policies, where I agree that there's tremendous parallels between Trumpism and fascism, or about this focus on identity and national identity in particular as the locus of political concern. The one place where I really break with the fascist label is, again, that the fascist movements were both highly militaristic and internationalist in their ambitions, right?
Right.
And this wasn't a peripheral concern with them. It was actually very central to the worldview, right? If you think about something like Italian fascism, it was very fixated on this idea that ultimately we're going to be engaging in martial wars of conquest in order to establish a new Italian empire that will essentially make us the rulers of the Mediterranean, as is our destiny, right?
Right.
And there are all kinds of interesting and, though ultimately, of course, evil justifications given for this on quasi or pseudo-Nietzschean bases. And you can talk about Ebola and all that kind of stuff, right? Nazism was even more militant in its kind of internationalist ambitions.
Right.
But what it added to this kind of project of creating a greater German empire, aspiring towards Lebensraum, was, of course, anti-Semitism, right? And this belief that not only were the Germans engaging in this empire-building project for the sake of Lebensraum, they were doing it because they had a world historical mission as the master race to combat their Semitic enemies, right? Who, of course, controlled global capitalism and global communism, both in some mysterious way that the Nazis never clarified, right? And you never really saw that with Trump. Again, and you don't really see it with any of the other postmodern conservative movements, as I call them, right? If anything, all these movements tend to be isolationist, sometimes even anti-militarist. You can see that with some of Trump's rhetoric and foreign policy decisions. Insular, and much more focused on waging various forms of agonistic politics and directing agonistic political programs against domestic enemies rather than external international opponents. Right.
100%. No, I see that for sure. I'm
open to being convinced, by the way, I should say. It's not like I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's absolutely wrong to say that Trump is a fascist. And I've seen some compelling people make that argument. Probably the two most prominent are the ones I pointed to, Jason Stanley and Timothy Snyder. They almost convinced me on this. I just think that Professor Rich Evans is correct when saying that you can't really have a fascist movement without this focus on militaristic empire building.
Sure. I totally got you there. That's something that I see 100% that I think calling Trump like an actual like fascist, like again, I sometimes have done that, but it's mainly out of the use of lazy language on my point. I think he much more fits the bill of something like a neo-fascist or a new fascism. I think one of the things though that you kind of hammered in is this like hyper real sort of entity that Trump is. But in my mind, I think that in some ways, like I don't think that totally breaks the bill of this new weird neo-fascism that we're seeing. Because I think that I think something that Jameson was really, really good at was elaborating on how postmodernism is sort of like a cultural logic. I think sometimes we can undersell truly the all-encompassing like nature of things, such as like I think nihilism is better distinguished as a cultural logic rather than a state of being in some ways, right? And that's
the way most people usually appeal to it when they're talking about nihilism, right?
Right, exactly. And so yeah, like I see that like we've just reached this threshold where like I don't know if there's a way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if there's a way back to an actual truly material order of politics as we know it, like this is, and we can segue into this as well about like future left politics, as I was curious what you thought. But we have reached this threshold of analysis where the world, like a lot of people say this, and I'm really inclined to agree the more I read Baudrillard, but the future is fucking Baudrillard, dude. And it's like, I think our analysis of the world is truly, it's more than just raw materialism and raw material politics and movements like fascism or Marxism. In some ways, we're in the hyper real right now, and like we can't escape it.
Oh, I completely agree with that, right? And I should say that I'm not a reactionary of any sort, right? I don't think that there's any point in talking about going back to something.
No, 150%. Yeah.
I mean, every now and then, I'll use that kind of language, like any good leftist, I sometimes nostalgically whack poetic about the good old days when we had a unified movement.
Oh, same.
And, there were democratic socialist parties in every country that were strong. And
dude, it's a travesty, right? Like a lot of people think that they think postmodernism is some prescriptive politics. No, like postmodernism is an analysis of how fucking shit this new world that we are in, right? Postmodernism is not good in a lot of ways, like
Oh,
The
100%.
yeah, so no, 100%. I got you. I hope I hope I didn't make you sound reactionary or anything like that. I apologize
No,
if
no,
I
no,
did.
no, no. What I was just going to say is that when I argue for a kind of return to materialism, what I don't mean is a kind of empiricist materialism, right?
Right.
This is actually what I think you see exemplified by people like F.A. Hayek or other kind of conservative materialists, right? Where
Hmm.
essentially there's this assertion that, look, this is just the way the world is. That's a fact, and we have to settle for these facts, right? We have to kind of comport ourselves towards reality as it is, right? And you can actually see this kind of rhetoric still employed by the IDW crowd, right? Think about Mr.
Yeah.
Facts and Logic himself, Ben Shapiro, right?
Right.
There's this attitude of this is just the way the world is, and we cannot change it, and since we cannot change it, all these kind of radical leftists out there who are saying that we can are just deluding themselves. They're just like, completely out of out of whack and all this stuff.
Hmm.
No, I don't think that at all. I think the point of dialectical materialism, right, is to show us that whenever we try to talk about reality just being something, we're already lapsing into a kind of error, right?
Right.
Because material reality is always in motion. It's always changing, right? And we change with it, which is why you need to engage in a cultural analysis of the present, like Jameson is talking about.
100%.
Right? But what kind of the opportunities this leaves open for us, of course, if we take a dialectical material approach, is we don't need to allow the tyranny of facts to get in the way of postulating what a new kind of factical arrangement could be in the future, right? We look at the world as it is and we say, okay, let's accept that. Let's think about how we can make it better. If you want the pithy statement. That's the way I would interpret dialectical materialism.
Yeah, something that so we can kind of go into that as well. That's I take dialectics super seriously in our new approach, and that's something that goddamn, man, the left, we don't think a lot of our typical analysis of practical politics is so undialectical in a lot of ways, where one of the problems too, where, you get into the sphere of like Marxism, Leninism, is you get into, we're talking about dialectical materialism, and that's a big it's turned into a cultural phenomenon on the internet, right? Where it's sort of like an aesthetic nature of Marxism that people want to tether themselves to for whatever reason. But there is this undialectical element to that, right? We're not changing our analysis. We're sticking to the same repetitive, stagnant things. And as Frederick Engels would put it, we're still using the quote unquote, I don't know why he calls it this, but he does, Lockean metaphysics, where we just, this empiricism of just comparing and contrasting two singular things. And yeah, man, I was curious to what maybe your ideas, like what the fuck do we do, man? Because I think the more that I read and the more I get into theory and philosophy, which is a relatively new endeavor for me, since I've started this channel, what the fuck do we do? Because I think you probably find a lot of the same problems on the left as I do. What do you think a good approach? How do we get people to maybe leave behind the cultural logic of politics, right? This like weird aesthetic nature, and maybe create a more intellectual approach to things.
Well, I mean, that's a huge question, right?
Right.
We could be sitting here and we could have many episodes on that question, right? I think I'll start with the more practical advice, and then I'll move to a more theoretical comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we can kind of get the easy stuff out of the way first. I think that just from my experience, one of the big things that turns a lot of people off of leftist politics, young people in particular, right, is just the sense that leftists are killjoys, or leftists politicize everything, or leftists are super hard on everyone. Now, a lot of these cliches come from conservatives who are attacking us, but they are grounded in a certain degree of truth, right? You can always find people who fit this kind of cliche. And that's why I think it's really important to accept Michael Brooks's really sound advice that you need to be hard on systems. In fact, we need to be really hard on systems. In fact, I go further and say we need to be harder on the system as it is now than we ever have been before, right? But you should be kind to people for the most part, right? Some people just don't deserve it. But for the most part, you should be kind to people, right? And that's the only way that you're really going to convince people, not just that left-wing politics speaks to them intellectually, but that it can provide them with a sense of community, that can provide them with a sense of hope, and that frankly they'll just like the people that they're around when they're engaging in political agitation.
Right. Isn't that such a weird problem though, and phenomenon? Me and Victor was on stream with his girlfriend Michelle, and we were talking. Yeah, absolutely. Like we were talking about that, like how prevalent shame is as a form of like politics and stuff. And I think when we started analyzing these things more discreetly, stuff that you do 100%, like it. God damn, man, it's devastatingly grim in a lot of ways, you know, like how many, when you look at things descriptively and very analytically, God, there's a lot of things that we have yet to overcome and we need to really work on.
Yeah, and I should say that I think that in some instances, shaming can serve a useful function.
Sure.
Right. So, for instance, when people shamed Sarah Huckabee Sanders for supporting the Trump administration, I think that that's warranted up to a certain point, right? I mean, if you're essentially sitting there and endorsing or abetting various forms of racist tyranny, then you should feel ashamed about that. And people should be aware of the fact that there's no place for that in a just society, okay? Saying that, I think that we are far too prone to turning to that as a weapon on the political left than we should be, right? And we lose a lot of supporters by essentially firing that bullet whenever we're faced with a problem, right? And I totally understand the temptation, right? I think that contemporary social media abets a shame culture, right? Because it's not really built to deal with complexities at the level of social structures and ideologies. So it tends to encourage us to locate the source of political problems in individuals, right? I think also it's a product of the kind of Protestant culture that we've lived in and imbibed in for a long period of time, and that's spread across the globe because of American hegemony. Because there's this sense in the way that we engage in political activism that when we're attacking a set of ideas, it's important to locate that in a person, right? And when we locate it in a person, what we end up doing isn't attacking their ideas so much as them, right? It's not just your ideas that are bad. You hold those ideas because you're a bad person, right? And again, I think that's really problematic because there are a lot of people who might have some bad ideas who nonetheless could be converted or convinced to adopt better ideas if we were to just try to reach out to them a little bit. Now, that's not everybody. You know, by no means is that everybody. But it's enough that it could make a difference, right? Which is why I think that we should be cautious about this. And the last reason, sorry,
I apologize.
No, I think there's a very human desire to want to locate the source of any of our problems, not just our political problems, but any of our problems, in something that's easy to understand, right? And when we locate the source of our political problems in an individual, or at least in a set of people, that's easy to understand. It gives us a target. You know what I mean? And I completely get the temptation. I do it myself. You know what I mean? When Trump was gone, I fucking broke out a big bottle of wine and drank it and was so happy. Right? But we need to recognize that the root of our problems goes well beyond certain individuals. And that includes Trump, right? Trumpism is going to be long past when he's dead. And it's a mistake to just think that now that the mean orange man is gone, everything's going to be A-okay, which is another reason we need to reject this idea of turning to shame as the primary way we agitate for left-wing positions.
Right. I think that I think that's so damn relevant and important. I think that in some ways, one thing that really would help us with this approach of understanding what we are doing is actually sort of thinking about things dialectically, not necessarily just in a processual way, right, where we look at things as processes, although that's very important, but we understand the true totality of what we're doing, right? Because like in a lot of ways, shaming and left politics, it's ironically the personal responsibility approach, right? Like it's funny, right, when you say that leftists aren't personally responsible, but leftists are some of the quickest people to like, look, like these people are supporting really fucking terrible things. I have to sacrifice maybe a relationship in order not to allow that to happen. No, like leftists take personal responsibility quite fucking seriously, but at the same time, there isn't a dialectical approach. There isn't an analysis of like the opposite end of what we are doing. And we do think of things in a very singular motion. And there isn't a very intellectual, truly like a robust way of looking at how we are operating in the political sphere online, whether that's in person or anything like that. And it really sometimes sucks. I don't think we understand a lot of the true totality of like what we do, and in some ways it's kind of impossible, but in other ways we don't go far enough to even try.
Yeah, and I should say, I don't think anybody can really be blamed for that, just in keeping
Right.
with what I said previously, right? And part of that is just because the kind of way that we engage in political agitation has changed so dramatically just in the last 20 years that no one can be blamed for not being able to keep up with it, right? I mean, 20 years ago, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no YouTube. The internet was just a kind of weird thing that people used to create blogs and send emails. And now the whole terrain has transformed completely.
Yeah.
Right? And I think Hegel was absolutely right that philosophy, and that includes critical theory, is always limited by its own time. And sometimes the best we can do is just conceive our own time and thought, right? But things have changed so rapidly that the minute we think we've grasped our own time and thought, it's already changed, right?
100%.
Into something else. And I don't think anybody should feel bad about the fact that we can barely keep up any longer. But nonetheless, we have to do the best we can as critical theorists and as left intellectuals. And if we fail, then I think we take the Beckettian attitude of, well, we fail again, and then we fail better. Right?
Yep, exactly. And in so many ways, isn't that in what you just said, like the true essence of this postmodern world, right? Where we truly are understanding the limits of our time, right? We're understanding how we can grasp the entire total order, the realm around us. Like that is, in my mind, almost that is the step past modernity, where we understand, well, holy fuck, we are so limited past this just realm of being and doing and stuff. Like it's impossible to nail stuff down half the time.
Yeah, and I mean, the book that I'm working on right now, it's called The Emergence of Postmodern Society, for Palgrave Macmillan, is on the roots of postmodernity. So some of your listeners might be interested in that when it comes out. Allocated in 3 different sources, I should say. But I think that we need to get past 2 temptations when it comes to modernity, right? One is the kind of classical Marxist temptation to just see postmodernity as inherently bad or inherently a reactionary epoch.
Right.
Right. And there are some figures like Jameson himself, I should say, and David Harvey, even people like Mark Fisher, brilliant theorists, right? And I've learned a lot from them. But they do take this kind of pessimistic attitude that postmodernity constitutes a regression from the more activist period of modernity, right?
Right.
And I don't think that's entirely true, right? I think postmodernity has a lot of latent potentialities within it for emancipatory politics that we're just starting to explore, and that pessimism can just be excessive optimism that's been disappointed too much.
Definitely,
right? Yeah. And so I think these people were disappointed. They gave into a pessimistic outlook. I think then that's just not the right approach, right? We should look at the potentialities within postmodern culture for emancipation, where they actually exist, and try to mobilize those, right? Rather than pining nostalgically for some earlier period where things were allegedly better, especially because they probably weren't much better then, right? The other thing about postmodernity that I think it's important to understand is that it is inherently limited, inherently limiting in certain important respects, right? This is kind of the inverse of what I was just saying. And the limitations of the postmodern epoch are also a good place to locate our theoretical inquiries, because once we understand those limitations, we can understand how to put pressure on existing social structures, since that's where they tend to be weakest.
Right.
And Corey Robin has written a really good book about this, where he talks, for instance, about how different reactionary institutions are vulnerable right now. And rather than just thinking about wholesale structural transformation all the time, it can be helpful for progressives to sometimes think about where they can most meaningfully make a difference. Because, of course, changing one thing might not seem like very much, but it can have ripple effects down the line that might prove more dramatic, seen from hindsight.
Yeah, 150%. Like we, in so many ways, we have to try to understand we should try to create new approaches to understanding the existing social order rather than sort of like ready at hand have an approach to prescriptive politics like, oh, we already understand what's going on, we just need to find new ways and how to combat that. Rather, it's sometimes the opposite, right? It's sometimes like, well, maybe your prescriptive approach is right, but maybe your actual descriptive analysis that you think is just like a priori isn't right. Like there are some things that we need to work on, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think that there are a lot of reasons for optimism, cautious optimism.
I'm totally curious because I find myself I would love that we can segue into that. That's something that I kind of struggle with. I'm a little bit of a doomer, and I try to combat that, but I would love to hear why, because I trust your view on this.
Sure, and I mean, believe me, I totally get it. Right? I mean, thinking back to the good old days of the 2008 recession, right? One of the things that I felt at the time was it's extremely depressing that even though we're witnessing this gigantic economic downturn, nobody's actually questioning the fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nobody who's sitting there being like, well, this testifies to the limitations of the capitalist mode of production and the kind of neoliberal state apparatus that's built atop of it. Almost everyone said what we need to do is try to fix this because the bones aren't broken. It's just the kind of edifice built atop of them. Right? Contrast that with right now, where you have a robust democratic socialist movement in the United States. There's another recession, and people are talking pretty overtly about the need for much more imaginative change. I think that's reason for optimism, right? And I think there are a lot of reasons for this. I think part of it is you have millennials and Gen Zers who've both grown up in times of economic precarity and crisis, which makes them a lot more sensitive to the limitations of the capitalist mode of production, maybe than Gen X or the baby boomers were. I also think it's because changes in digital technologies mean it's easier for us to get a lot of our ideas across than it was before, right? And I also think it's because there's a lot of good people out there who've been working really hard to change the parameters of the discussion, to bring things like democratic socialism back onto the table, right? And that includes everyone from politicians like AOC to YouTube channels like your own, to podcasts like what we do at Plastic Pills, right?
Yeah.
So I look around and I take that all together, and I definitely don't apply some kind of teleological significance to it, like, oh, this is all evidence that we're going to win. Our victory is, 5 years down the line, but at least it gives me some hope for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good way to approach it, right? That's something that we can forget too, where, maybe I'll take another approach that I see that, sometimes you'll find people describing like something like social democracy as something sort of reactionary. They're like, oh, this is a centrist position, but really, like what you said, like we've actually moved to a point where like maybe like the idea that people are even saying that in the United States might be indicative of something good rather than bad, rather than people taking probably an inaccurate approach on social democracy, which is not something reactionary at all. Matter of fact, in North America in general, social democracy is quite radical in a lot of ways, depressing as that is. But yeah,
I think that's exactly right. And I just wanted to interject and say, I think Zizek is exactly right here, right? And so is Bhaskar Sankara, the author of the Socialist Manifesto, right? There can sometimes be this vulgar Leninist impulse to say revolution or nothing, right?
Right.
Either we completely tear down the system or it's just some kind of reactionary tinkering around the edges. And I don't think that's true. I think what you accomplish when you achieve something like universal healthcare for all in the United States, or free university tuition, for instance, in Canada, something that we're fighting for, right, is you move the parameters of the discussion.
Right.
Right. And once you start moving them in the right direction, it's a lot easier to try to keep pushing in that direction. Right. If your only thing is you have to have a revolution and a violent militaristic revolution and change things completely from the bottom up, you're going to be waiting an awful long time. And I also think a lot of people are going to have strong reservations about that. You get universal healthcare for all in the United States. You get universal public or post-secondary education for people in Canada and the U.S. and Mexico, right? Then you can start agitating for the next set of reforms.
Right.
And they can be more dramatic.
Right. I think that's that's a good approach, because that's something that I see that, like you said, the vulgar Leninist approach. That's totally true, and that's it can be kind of a problem in a lot of ways. Because in so many ways, like we can't, like no one's like, in truly the most simplistic way, we can't overthrow the U.S. government. It's just not going to happen with an AR-15. It's not going to happen with arming the proletariat. It's not gonna, like, I think this discussion is kind of bad in a lot of ways. It's truly overly simplistic. But I'm curious to see, because that's a lot of like the biggest left wing questions, like how do we get past a system of hyper commodity and capitalism and austerity? Yeah.
I should say also, and I think this is a key point that I've been trying to stress a lot in my recent work. I also don't think it's particularly Marxist.
Sure.
This kind of vulgar Leninism.
100%.
The reason is that this temptation to say what we need to do is go to year zero, right? Is thoroughly anti-dialectical and ahistorical, right? What it resembles more than anything is utopian socialism of the kind that Marx and Engels criticized, which is basically, we'll tear down everything and we'll rebuild from scratch and it'll be better, right? And one of the great theoretical innovations of dialectical materialism and the kind of critical theory tradition Marx basically developed, amongst others, is to say, no, right? There is no year zero. You're always building from within a set of historical conditions. You need to be very cognizant of these when you try to change things, because that's the only way that you'll be able to change them successfully.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
And I think a lot of people who lean too much in the Leninist direction of Marxist-Leninism forget this lesson, right?
Yeah, and it's something inherently anti-dialectical in so many ways, right? I try to a lot of Marxist-Leninists talk about dialectics, but I think even being in the theoretical terrain of Marxism-Leninism in 2021 is quite anti-dialectical just on its own, right? And that's just the theoretical terrain. Nonetheless, the actual prescriptive political ideas set in motion. I think that like I value someone like Zizek, where he takes a sort of technological approach, where he says, like, look, like this new emancipation past capitalism, it's going to be something that's far more elusive, and in some ways it could be something like almost private. Like he talked about how the digital sphere of commodification, it resists capitalism in the sense that people pirate the shit out of it. Or, for example, another bigger example is that for corporations to sell their products, they can't, like, they, in some ways they have to release their product as an open source thing. And so we might be seeing, like, with automation, with the potential blocking of technological progress, because if you just keep placing financial barriers to new technology, people aren't going to be they won't be able to consume it. We're going to reach a potential point where asking, like, for money essentially is going to stagnate our technological process. And even in a capitalist system, capitalists are going to run into issues because they don't want to do that either. So it's like the true movement past capitalism is so much more complex than just overthrow capitalism, the bourgeoisie institutions, and institute a dictatorship of the proletariat.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I completely understand why it is that people might want to fetishize this particular form of revolutionary activity, right? It has a kind of aesthetic grandeur. There are historical parallels that people point to with the French and Russian revolutions. And I think it also just appeals to a certain kind of militaristic urgency, right? That we need to do something now, right?
And to be fair, I want to interject, like, that militaristic urgency. I want to be fair, like, that's a very valid feeling to have, right? We're facing climate change right now. We're facing
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not meaning to discount it, right?
Sure.
I just think that it needs to be channeled in more productive directions.
100%.
By recognizing that kind of achievements and shifts that you were talking about earlier on aren't just epiphenomenal, right? One by one, they might not look like much, but cumulatively, they can actually bring us to what Bhaskar calls 5 minutes past capitalism, if we manage to push hard enough and fast enough, right? And this might not appeal to a certain kind of aestheticized politics, but I think it's a lot more realistic. And ultimately, it will have much more clear benefits for a lot of the people that we're trying to help, which is ultimately what the point of any left-wing politics should be, right? Not just about appealing to our aestheticized sensibilities, but making a material difference for the people on the ground and ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity at living a life of dignity and without precarity.
Right, and it's funny you went into that. It isn't a sort of, you said, a fetish of Leninism and Marxism, because that's sort of the problem. There is a massive fetish of Marxism, of like it turns into a cultural thing. Oddly enough, I had a YouTuber named Prolocult on, and I think he falls pretty firmly into the Marxist-Leninist camp, but he's a very concrete thinker, and I appreciate him a lot. But he did point out, he's like, yeah, there is a massive cultural Marxist thing that is happening. It's this fetish of Marxism, but in so many ways, it's really ironic. Like, what is more idealistic than a fetish of something like Marxism? And stuff like that. So I think that having discussions, very honest discussions, appreciating the urgency to rid the world of a very horrid, brutal system is incredibly important. But it's also extremely important too to have discussions like me and you are having. I'm sure Bhaskar, I think he's a big proponent on like how like democratic socialism, how that actually is quite a radical system, and how it's actually in so many ways, it's a very promising system past capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say, I'm by no means a dogmatic. I'm not a dogmatic Marxist in any sense, right?
Sure.
I think Marx was a great thinker. Like any great thinker, he made plenty of great errors, right? And rather than seeing a deviation from a orthodox Marxist framework as some kind of heresy, which I still do see sometimes people claim, right? There are a lot of really hard-edged Marxists out there who don't accept any kind of deviation.
Right.
We should see that as a compliment to the ingenuity and genius of somebody like Marx, right? If somebody is really a great thinker, there's no greater testament to their ability that you can pay than to be critical of them and to try to advance their thought in a very productive and creative and original way, right?
Absolutely.
The kind of people who aren't worthy of this kind of critical attention are definitely ideologues, demagogues, and dogmatists who have nothing interesting to say. And so you either have to take them at face value or just reject them.
Right. I mean, we should fundamentally try to work away. This is a problem where we can become intellectually lazy really, really fast. And that's a very, I think that's something in so many ways that marks the end of like, because I think you have recognized this as well. There was like this period in 2015, 2016 to like 2018 of a serious uptick in like conservative, like reactionary politics. But I think exactly why they failed and that's falling apart is because of the intellectual laziness of it, like the internet, the intellectual dark web and, Ben Shapiro and shit. I think a lot of people realize how fucking lazy that was. And it's something that I do, care is that on the online sphere, because online politics, a lot of people is like, well, Twitter's not real life, YouTube's not real life. Well, as we see, technology plays a way larger role in politics than we could ever imagine looking back. And that's something I do care about. I don't want us to fall into this trap of really intellectually lazy approaches to politics. And yeah.
No, I think that's really good. And I guess I'll just end with that, right? Because I think you're exactly right. There can always be this temptation to turn to easy pseudo-intellectual arguments, usually because they're popular, they're easy to format, and they're easy to digest, right? And they're also pretty lucrative, right?
Right, exactly. It makes a shit ton of money.
Yeah, you can make a lot of money doing that, right? I think there's also a place sometimes there's definitely a place for making things accessible, allowing giving the public the tools it needs to make sense of some of these more highfalutin ideas. I'm not disdaining any of that. But I think the truth is that ideas that endure are those that are powerful, well-formulated, subject to relentless critique, and subject to relentless self-criticism by their authors, I should say, right? So while there'll always be a place for these kind of pop IDW types, I don't imagine they're going to have a very lasting legacy. And I really hope that once some of their fans grow out of them, they'll turn to a much better politics and realize the superficiality of a lot of these guys and their outlook. Right,
100%.
That's when we can try to hook them in with our ideas, because our ideas are better and they're going to make people's lives better.
Right. Yeah. 150%, dude. I couldn't have said it better.
Yes. Okay. So I gotta go.
Okay.
But, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, really absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. Chat. Matthew McManus, here's his book, What is Postmodern Conservatism? You said you're writing a new book as we speak, yeah?
Yeah, the emergence of postmodernity or the emergence of postmodern society. Haven't settled on it yet, but should be out later this year. And for those who are interested in the What is Postmodern Conservatism book, this one will kind of give the theoretical grounding to it in a much more robust way.
Gotcha. Awesome, dude. All right. Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. Like, we'll have to do this again. Maybe you and Victor, whatever. Like, I love talking to you guys. I appreciate it a lot.
Anytime, man.
All right. Thank you, dude. I will see you later.
Oh, peace. Bye.
Peace. All right, guys. That was cool. I'll go ahead. I'll plug his book here. All right. Thank you guys for all hanging out. I'll keep streaming as always. Victor, how's it going, my friend? David, thank you so much for the donations, my friend. I genuinely appreciate it. It means a ton. I think that like that's something that, you know, we talk about on stream a lot, you know, going on Matt's final point, where we need a sort of, this is something that I care about deeply, where I think that we need a sort of more intellectual approach to politics, more so than what we've kind of probably ever done in history. But there's this, again, I want to say almost a reactionary tonality to that, where people mistake and misunderstand actual true intellectual endeavors as something elitist or something like that, where and I think that's such a mistake, right? You know, it's based whenever Mal says that. But whenever some weird dude on the internet or anyone else says that, well, that's lib shit. Anyways, yeah. How the fuck did you land Matt? Yeah, I just reached out to him. Me and Matt follow each other on Twitter, but yeah. Yeah, dude, Matt is, I gotta say, I think like people like Victor and chat, I think people like Victor and Matt, you guys have some of the best shit to say in this realm of like weird internet politics that's becoming ever increasingly popular, which is good. Like, that's a really good thing. I think that, you know, we're adding a lot of criticism to the natural order of how things are working politically online as we should, but that's good. Like, the fact that, you know, online left politics is as popular and as large as it is, that's a fucking big deal, guys. It's a really huge deal. But Victor says, oh man, we're all friends. Yeah, we do kind of have like a little Epoch plastic pill alliance for sure. I was a big fan. I mean, I think I roughly started making videos right around the same time as Pills started. I think around the same time, very, very tiny. But I saw Pills's channel when, I mean, I think he had like what, 1K or 2K subs, something like that. You know, he's grown immensely since then, but I was a fan ever since. I really think Pills makes like some of the best videos on YouTube. I try to in some ways I don't like compete in a competitive sense, but I try to make a concerted effort to try to match the videos that Pills makes. And it's very tough. Pills makes amazing videos. Democracy will eat capitalism. People's instinct to survive will kick in sooner or later. Thank you so much, Mateo. I appreciate that so much.
Democracy will eat capitalism. People's instinct to survive will kick in sooner or later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mateo. I appreciate the $10. It is. I think that that, you know, that might be a what is that? What am I thinking? What's the fucking Nick Land, the accelerationist viewpoint, right? Where, you know, I mean, and you know, I try to be careful with accelerationists, because even Marx talks about this. Like, guys, like I don't know if I agree with this 100%, but Marx does explicitly say, like, look, probably not going to move past capitalism until people don't even have property. It's like in the German ideology, he says that pretty explicitly. Yeah. The quartering has 1 million views per video. You are nothing. Holy shit. Well, thank you for that. That very kind message, Ojo. Death Drive, though. Yeah, accelerationism is definitely can be very hard. It can lean hardcore into the accelerationist camp for sure. Or, sorry, the Death Drive camp real quick. And I see that a lot. Just happy to contribute to building a small little community in this corner of the internet. No grand aspirations behind that. No, LO, you read that out of context, Epoch? Wait. You guys are cool, but you are just patting your backs. Let's be honest, nobody watches your video except we. Oh, wait. Wait, what did I read out of context? Oh no, I don't want to do that. AI and capitalism are the same thing. They certainly reinforce each other. Well, yeah. Yeah, hopefully I don't want to take anything. So it's not a dig that we are nothing. Oh, I gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that. I was like, God damn, man. I figured, if you're in here chilling, it wasn't, like a huge own or anything, but sorry about that, dude. But yeah. Yeah, in the Communist Manifesto, he supports global trade as a means for heightening contradictions. Also, his whole theory of history relies on the development of productive forces. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is why I say, like, accelerationism, in some ways, Marx has a very accelerationist tonality in some ways where you can come to that conclusion very easy. But again, I think this is where we shouldn't fucking deify Marx. I think that this is... maybe theoretically speaking, in the time of industrial capitalism, that was more global, right? Industrial capitalism is more regional than it is global at this point. That might be an okay conclusion in some ways, but I think we we ought to be very careful of that approach. On average, not a million. Yeah, that's the quartering sucks. But I think people like the quartering are going. I think in so many ways, the quartering is very, like, truly, like, nothing, like, I'm not going to be that person like, oh, it's apolitical, or a lot of people claim a lot of things are apolitical when they're really not, but quartering really, like I gotta say, man, I gotta give people a year of watching the quartering and they'll be done. Like, if they're halfway competent, like, the quartering's really fucking stupid. Like, I like, truly, the quartering is one of the most stupid people I've ever seen on the internet. There's a couple people where you, yeah, there's just some of those people that are really fucking dumb that you just can't help but just like, holy fuck, quartering's one of them. Oh, also Victor. So I still want to stream. Victor, if you ever want to come on stream, including now, whatever, feel free to come on, my friend. I genuinely love having you on as well. You can hop in Discord anytime. It's like sensationalism porn, the quartering. Yeah, it is. So I don't know if you're chilling in chat. Yeah. That was my read of him. Dude, that's what yeah, I missed the whole conservative big YouTuber thing. Yeah. Dude, I think that's what I talked about with Matt for a second, was that, like, look, there was this 2015 through like 2018 sort of really reactionary uptick in political thought on YouTube, and it sort of fell apart. And I think in a lot of ways it fell apart because a lot of people realized how fucking lazy it was and how stupid. I hope we don't. And in some ways, guys, in an opposite vein, it could be the opposite as well. Like, in some ways, it was the laziness of some leftist thinkers to appropriate a more identitarian approach to politics rather than more. I'd love to, but I got work to get back to. But maybe both and Matt. Yes, 100%. Let's definitely do that sometime. I would love to. Yeah, so I think that in some other ways there is this sort of, it was a lazy approach as well from the left, where we approached everything from a lens of identity, and sometimes we can still do that. I will be real though, that's gone away quite a bit. I think people are a lot more skeptical about liberal identity than they ever have been on the left, and it's not to say that identity doesn't matter. Of course, I always say this, but that something more grounded in a more material approach is 100% more useful to emancipatory politics rather than identity. I think in identity, we can naturally lead to a very antagonistic nature with things, and it doesn't make sense. I truly think this is where academia has failed. The structure of academia, for sure, is the past 30 to 40 years has not been in a good place. Just don't turn into Chapo. I will never. No, that's not my thing. And it's not to say that Chapo's like bad, right? You know, I shit on the it's not like I shit on Chapo. I do shit on the idea of like sort of a vulgar politics as entertainment sort of thing. And where it creates this really confused state of like people don't know whether to take someone like Chapo Trap House when they're talking about serious things and they're joking about it. They don't know whether to take that totally seriously or not, right? But they point out, I think Chapo Trap House says explicitly, like, guys, like we're fucking around. Like, this is a shit posting podcast. And good, I'm glad that they do that. But the problem is when you get into political satire, a lot of the times it does create a sort of a confused state of things, and I don't want to do that. I don't care to do that. I mean, I'll have fun like everyone else. I'll try to, but the one thing that I want to do is approach politics from a radically serious position. That's like and that could be hard, right? That's hard to do. It takes a lot on your mental health. Yeah. I think a lot of people have. I think that's guys, truly, like it's amazing how much like political left-wing satire and shit posting has grown through the years, but it makes perfect sense, guys. Like, we are in a terrible fucking state. It makes perfect sense that it has grown with the complete decay of neoliberal capitalism. Makes perfect sense. It's a coping thing, right? It's like, God damn, I can't take everything serious. It hurts, you know? And I feel that. So I have to watch out for my mental health. It's very tough sometimes, but I want to approach politics, theory and philosophy from a very serious standpoint. So yeah. What did Victor study? Poli-sci. I think Victor studies, he's a PhD student in a political theory department, which is sick. That's probably, if I ever went back to grad school, it's something I would hope to do, but yeah. There's not a lot of political theory in the United States. Chrisman has been talking a lot about how he feels like he lost the line between entertainment. Wow, that's really interesting. I did not know that, guys, but when I pointed that out to a lot of Chapo Trap House fans, and they get very defensive really fucking fast. But that's crazy that he's said that, because and that's awesome. I'm glad that he does. And it's like, maybe, you know, I never thought Matt Chrisman would have thought that himself. Like, I feel like he would have known exactly what he's doing. Rather, his audience doesn't. That's the thing. Like, it's like the audience doesn't know what exactly to take from something like that. So rather, I hope that I come across as someone that's like, I take this shit super fucking serious. But yeah, but that's naturally hard. Like, I'll mess around and sort of, you know, make jokes, but this is just a natural thing of human nature. It's very hard to discern from some things. So I hope not to do that. Chrisman is a real one. Yeah, no, I a lot of the people at Chapo Trap House are quite. I think they have quite good politics. Perspective on the online left thing. Interesting. Yeah, I would love to see what they thought. That's something that it wouldn't surprise me if they have felt a little bit disenchanted too. Really, guys. The culture, because that's Marxism in so many ways has turned into an online cultural phenomenon. Right? We've talked about this a lot, but I can't tell you how often I have seen on Twitter, people, they'll make shit posts about Marx and they'll have this halfway serious tonality where you'll see, I've seen people take pictures with lingerie and say, like, have you read your Marx tonight? And that's kind of like the entire like nature a lot of the times of what they talk about on social media. Not all the time, but it's just, to me, it's sort of, it's a fetish of, and I don't mean fetish necessarily in a sexual way, but a libidinal way, where it creates sort of a fetish of Marxism and its approach. And I think that can be pretty fucking detrimental to future emancipatory politics. Do you think Chomsky's analytic philosophy background is what makes his politics idealist and one-dimensional in thought? No, I don't think so. I think that sometimes analytical philosophy really isn't like theoretical philosophy, or, like analytical philosophy is very good at understanding the descriptive nature of someone's argument and stuff like that, right? And in that sense, like, dude, I think analytical philosophy is fucking sick. We had Matt on. I would love to have Ben Burgess on sometimes. I doubt Ben Burgess knows who the fuck I am. Or if I could even get him on. I'm such a fucking small channel. But I would love to have Ben Burgess on to talk a little bit more about maybe analytical philosophy. I read his book, Give Them an Argument. That would be great. No, I think Chomsky. I think Chomsky's not. I hate. There is a reactionary pushback to people like Chomsky. Ironically, from the left, but Chomsky. And there's some things Chomsky says that's really stupid, right? That theory is useless. I think he said that quite a few times, like theory, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. Zizek just says shit. That's dumb as fuck. If I would love to have Chomsky on sometime, but if that was something that he would say, I would push back immediately on that. I don't know if he still holds that position. I would be a little bit shocked. Anyways, Chomsky is a very, he's easy to read. And in some ways, guys, that's super fucking useful. Like, he's very easy to read. He talks about stuff in a very concrete lens. And in that sense, that is not a con. That is a pro. That is a positive. That is a good thing. And that's why Chomsky is so popular. The Zero Books guy, Lane, went on Come Town a few episodes, was gold. Oh, interesting. I would, I didn't listen to that. I didn't listen to that episode in its entirety, but I heard that he went on there. I heard Douglas Lane shit on. You guys tell me the story on that. What happened there? Douglas Lane shit on cuck philosophy, or cuck philosophy got pretty. He was a little bit angry about what Douglas Lane said about him. I have no idea what Douglas Lane said, but no idea. I'm going to update the stream title. Yeah, I like Chomsky, but I have a lot of people who are like, yeah, I know theory. I've read Manufacturing Consent 4 times. Yeah, Manufacturing Consent isn't really a work of large theory at large. I would say Manufacturing Consent is theory in its own way. For sure, it's just one of the most approachable forms of theory that is a little bit... Yeah, I don't know. Manufacturing Consent, understanding how media operates and forming a sort of subconscious consent of foreign policy and policy at large. It's super important. I think that's why, like, truly, like, I don't want to. There is this thing, like, the fact that Chomsky said he thinks we should vote for Biden over, we should vote for Biden. The fact that he's like a lib or he's whatever, that is the most stupid fucking thing ever. And there is a reactionary tonality to how people approach Chomsky, and it's really fucking stupid. It's really stupid. Fascinating, given that cuck philosophy's analysis seems more rigorous than Lane's. Yeah, I don't consume a lot of like YouTube philosophy stuff. I really don't. That's probably not good. I should probably have a better grasp in the sphere of things that I that I operate within, but I don't. I watch Pills' videos all the time, but Pills is much more concrete. My understanding, I have watched cuck philosophy many times, but cuck philosophy seems to talk about cultural things through sort of a kind of semi-theory lens. He doesn't seem to explain, maybe I'm wrong, he doesn't seem to explain like theory concretely in text, but yeah. Oh, dude, I loved it when Virgil said he put him in his place. So, dude, guys, yes, that, okay, also, when he put it, yeah, that was the most stupid, this is what I'm talking about, where, I don't know much about Virgil, so I'm not going to make a total, I've heard, I don't really dislike Virgil Texas, but that was a really fucking dumb thing. And also he says, he said we need to put anarchists in their place. I for some weird reason, I just don't trust that Virgil Texas is going to have good takes on what like actual theoretical anarchism is in a Marxist lens. Like for some weird reason, Virgil Texas strikes me as someone who had no idea what the fuck he's talking about in that regard. Maybe he does. We need to put anarchists in his place. He's never elaborated on what he means by anarchist. Chomsky isn't really just like an anarchist. He's a syndicalist in a lot of ways, right? Where he and in some ways, syndicalism really isn't. I mean, it is anarchism, but it's a different form of anarchism that has sort of a government tonality as far as organization goes, right? With trade unions, right? That's sort of the ethos of syndicalism. It's Yeah, I don't know. I think that is incredibly stupid. Stupid. But maybe I haven't looked too much into what the fuck he's talking about. But naturally, he kind of pushed me away from that. So that might be my fault. I saw that. I was like, God damn. It was a corn dog moment. Yeah, I get a very sometimes I get a very overconfident, really douchebag and I think that's part of the thing, guys. Again, we're talking about new left aesthetics. Like that's sort of the thing. It's cool to like be unbothered. Like when you're talking to someone like Noam Chomsky, listen, I had to put Noam Chomsky in his place. Like that intellectual, like it just seems like so fake. Like it feels so inauthentic, you know? Like it feels very performative. I get that in some ways a lot about how people approach online things. Like, you know, people like being unbothered on the internet or like, oh, I'm above that. It's stupid. It feels fake and really milquetoast and it really inauthentic. And I think that's not good. It's good to be vulnerable in a lot of ways, you know? It's good to be vulnerable online and it sounds a little corny on its own, but it's good to be, it's good to take things serious, you know? Okay, bye. Thanks for the video. If you're taking off, I'll see you. Oho Rojo or Rojo. Related channel is Radical Reviewer, just so you know. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. This really small YouTube, Ivan Shady Existence, has a hilarious take on cuck philosophy, making fun of one of his most stupid videos. Well, I would never want to make fun of someone like cuck philosophy because I think cuck philosophy, introducing people to philosophy and theory is such a fucking wonderful thing. Maybe one of his videos bad and some content, but guys, that's probably, you know, again, learning philosophy and theory is a process, you know, like looking back on some of my videos when I wasn't knowing what I was doing with my direction, how I wanted to do things. Like for example, my Ethics of Ambiguity by de Beauvoir, I tried to make it way too short. I had the idea that I was going to make like 3 videos a month and make them like 10 minutes long, but I'm not going to do that. And I made sort of a very watered down version of de Beauvoir's Ethics of Ambiguity. And for that, the video will probably be remade. But like, you know, like, philosophy and theory is a process, you know? I think introducing people into this, into a serious context is extremely useful. And I don't want to, I think what cuck philosophy does is pretty fucking good. Parenti, the Marxist, dropped Bernie after Byrne voted to bomb Hugo. Wait, like Bernie had a vote for me, but he wasn't really a socialist? Parenti, the Marxist? I have no idea. Wait. Bernie voted to bomb Yugoslavia like in the 90s? What's wrong with cuck philosophy? Yeah, I don't know either. I have no idea. I don't know if that's for me. I don't watch cuck philosophy all that much. Chomsky has dumb political takes, but at least he is a proper academic. Parenti doesn't know shit about history. I don't know. I don't know about any of these people. I mean, I know about Chomsky. Yeah, I think Chomsky's take on theory is quite bad, right? Are you saying like, look, you're talking about, you know, theory and these overly complex ideas. He's right to say that Zizek is way too convoluted in some ways, and he would be wise to sort of let's narrow the continental plane down a little bit. I think that's very accurate to say. I think Chomsky's right on that. But to say that there is no value in something like theory, not good. Not a good take. Not a good take. On Chomsky, didn't he almost single-handedly change how linguists analyze language? Wasn't he? That's something that, okay, so if I've had people who wanted me to cover Chomsky. If I covered Chomsky, I'd want to take a more linguistic approach to Chomsky, because I think in some ways that's his more academic, you know, field, right? Thoughts on Adorno's critique of jazz? If I'm remembering correct, Adorno's critique of jazz is more that jazz is like it's all too similar, right? It's not anything revolutionary new as far as art. I don't know too much about that. Chomsky is someone who thinks he's more base than he actually is. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Chomsky, again, Chomsky is base in so many ways, right? Chomsky is an extremely, guys, Chomsky has done so much for the left, for left politics in the United States, guys. Chomsky is great. I truly think it's a fucking terrible idea to just say that Chomsky sucks. Like, that's not true. Chomsky's great, but he does, you know, he's a human being, and he has some bad takes. I think some bad takes. I don't know. We'll usually you don't know your bad takes until a couple of years later, you know. It takes a little bit. Parenti is a tanky because he knows you need tanks for a revolution. I'm sorry. Well, I would have rather had Bernie than Biden. Oh, absolutely. Oh God. Fuck. Holy shit. Yeah. No, I you know, talking about revolution, again, there is a fetish of revolution, right? Again, this is the thing, we fetishize things so quick. There is a weird, unadulterated, worship of politics and stuff like that, where I think we need to be super careful about, you know. We need to take these things, when you fetishize something, you don't take it quite that seriously. It's a pleasure orientated thing. And this isn't a lot of people think like, oh, you take like a sexual approach. No, that's quite literally we're just taking this larger cultural worship. You water down exactly the analytical tonality, the seriousness of what's being talked about, right? There's a good interview on YouTube from last year, Chomsky and Oxford Linguistics Society. Yeah, that would be interesting. I think if I covered Chomsky on the channel, what I want to do is I want to cover his more the field of linguistics. I think linguistics is incredibly interesting. I don't know much about it, but I think that so much comes down to language. I'm quite surprised linguistics hasn't grown, and it's not the we haven't taken linguistics as seriously as we probably should have. Chomsky into streets, Zizek into sheets. No, I mean, in some ways, like Chomsky, listen, I listen, guys, we'll get into some spicy stuff here, maybe. I think Chomsky's approach to electoral politics is quite correct. Guys, in the United States, we have a two-party system. If we are going to partake in electoral politics at all, I think we should. Guys, there's nothing like I haven't really grasped. I haven't heard an argument that truly justifies completely abandoning electoral politics. I really haven't. I haven't. Should we partake in electoral politics? Yes. Should that be like 5% of our politics? Yes. It shouldn't be much. But we would be it is so concretely incorrect to say that electoral politics does not quite literally impact people's lives in the most concrete sense. People will fucking die if certain people are elected, and vice versa, right? There is an actual utilitarian, concrete way in which electoral politics operates. It's not to say that like direct action is far more important, right? Absolutely. Holy shit. Electoral politics is so insufficient. But goddamn, we gotta be really, really specific about what we are doing. We have to be extremely specific on how things work, right? To say that electoral politics it just means nothing. It doesn't do anything. That's literally wrong, guys. That is concretely incorrect. It doesn't do enough. It totally doesn't. And anyone who says that are completely correct. But to say that it is totally that it doesn't do anything at all, that it's completely worthless. Oh God, what a mistake. What a mistake. So let's see if there's any pushback to that. I'm interested. I don't know. I would rather not have a revolution. It bugs me sometimes when I talk to Marxists and they fetishize, taking out landlords and shit. Absolutely, guys. It's truly a civil war would be. Yeah, there's also, guys, I've talked about this on stream before. There's a lot of evidence to say if we did have a civil war or a revolution, it would kill like half our population. People would quite literally, half the population would starve. And it's partially to do with how we structure it has to do with the way food infrastructure is used today. Infrastructure today, trucks like run 24/7. That's our infrastructure. Back then, like even 50, 60 years ago, guys, food supplies were in grocery stores. There was mass amounts of food supplies. So even 50, 60 years ago, revolution would look radically different. Let's see. All right, man, I'm going to ask you this clearly once and for all. Do you back the blue or not? Wait, is this me? Wait, is that a question for me? Do I back the blue? Do I back the police? No, not really. No, I mean, the police suck in more ways than not. The police are fucking shit in so many ways. Do I think in an analytical, do I think in a concrete sense every fucking cop is just morally bad? No, we shouldn't have, guys, we shouldn't make overly moralistic equations about the police. It's incorrect, right? So one of the most important things that we can do, is we can make universal claims about the nature. All right, I'm unsubscribing. What? One of the most important things we can do is make universal claims about the nature of politics, the nature of socioeconomics as a whole. One thing that I think is we do make overly moralistic claims about the police. One of the best things we could ever do when explaining the situation with police is we could elaborate on how the police are being fucked over by capitalists, right? So something that I hate this. This is the most stupid claim. The police are not working class. That is bullshit. The police are working class. If you take, class is not an essence. Class isn't, oh, does someone have a Lamborghini? Are they working class? Dude, guys, working class isn't an essence. It is an analytical conclusion to come to through a material analysis. Thus, in a lot of ways, class can only be binary with production, right? We view class as the consequence of production at large. The police do not own the means of production. They reinforce it, though. They're tools. And in that sense, people are like, people say that they're like, okay, yeah, but they serve the rich. Guys, so does every other proletariat. So what happens here is we should take something from this. The left is really, really good at explaining why means testing everything, right? Means testing policy is really bad, right? For example, should rich people be, should the proletariat, should the bourgeoisie, should rich people have access to universal healthcare by right? Absolutely. 100%. If we instituted a UBI, should rich individuals get that UBI? Absolutely. It should become universal, because what you do is you introduced a universal gateway into a social system that benefits everyone. You're not means testing something. The left understands this very well in a lot of ways. They understand that, look, this is good. In many ways, we don't take strategic approaches to means testing, right? So what that means is we don't make universal arguments and outreach about politics. We moralize people like the police. We moralize people in the military. When that's not the case, we should point out, okay, I need to read Crowd Article. See you, man. I'll see you. We need to point out more that the police are quite literally, they are being used by capitalists. The bourgeoisie quite literally take, yeah, it's not in their material interest to overthrow the capitalist system. Oh, yes, it is. I completely disagree with that. Absolutely, it is. Police officers don't get paid shit. And they're put in terrible positions because of material consequences, right? People don't just rob stores because they're just, evil, moral beings. No, people commit crimes a lot of the times because of the material ground around them. That is not in the benefit of the police officers. That is not in the benefit of police officers who make 40, 50K a year, right? Absolutely, it is in their material. We need to point that out, that it is in the material interest of military members and the police that holy fuck they are being exploited by capitalists. Guys, people who are quite rich, who don't own the means of production, we need to point out that even rich people, it is in their favor that capitalism still creates a social order where they are still vulnerable if something happens to them, right? Like, dude, guys, there's all kinds of multimillionaires who fall apart and they become very destitute. We need to point out that naturally capitalism is an extremely rigorously individual system, and it does not have a lot of leeway. That is the worst thing that we could ever do is try to not make a sort of is to create a non-universal approach to prescriptive politics. That's the good thing about Marxism, is it is very good at pointing out universals, right? Yeah. Your argument is good. Yeah. Does having a class also presuppose that we think of ourselves in terms of having a class? Something that I don't think, I don't think people think of themselves as, like, in so many ways, this is the unfortunate thing where Freud won, I guess, where people identify more on who they sleep with or their sexual identity far more than they ever would with their material class, right? Yeah. In so many ways, yeah, police, are they class traitors? Yeah, but guys, like in some ways, like we all are. Like that's the thing. Like a lot of people are like, no, they're tools for the bourgeoisie. A lot of people say that a lot. Guys, you're a tool for the bourgeoisie. That's the point. That is the fundamental point. We are that is the point. And you need to point this out. But to completely create a moral conclusion and say that, oh, all bad like that. Like, yeah, no, but is there a moral wrongdoing by being a police officer, especially during goddamn what happened this summer? Fuck yeah, absolutely. And in some ways, there is no good cop, but in another way, there is no what is good, right? We need to be concrete. We need to be specific about this, right? How far can we take class conditions if class is not overwhelmingly? Yeah, it's hard. That's a very, very difficult question. I don't know. Like me and one of my philosophy professors talked about this. A lot of philosophers, well, not a lot. Philosophy departments are quite good compared to a lot of other departments. He was just, I think we were having a discussion about Freud versus Marx in the sense of how people identify, and he was like, guys, I don't know where, like why people identify more with who they sleep with, their sexual orientation more than class, because it is not more universal, right? In so many ways, your material relations in a society is so much more universal, you know. And it's true. It's completely true, and it's devastating that has sort of been the conclusion to come to. That is, yeah. Do you think that it was in the material interest of slave catchers to abolish slavery? No, not really. No. I wouldn't. Well, so I mean, okay, look. I mean, there's actually. Well, so that is a little bit different than police officers. A lot of slave owners, guys, weren't like working class. They quite literally did own. They like slave owners, in many ways, did directly own the means of production. Quite literally, you know, police officers don't own the means of production, right? If we're going to look at class as an analytical conclusion rather than an essence, it's their relation and where production comes from. And slave owners, yeah, they're very much, you know. But in some ways, guys, I think that also too we can take this further. Guys, the bourgeoisie in some ways would benefit from socialism. Like, I think we need to make this case a little bit more. We need to talk about this a little more. Where like people aren't in, like, class isn't a structure. Class ebbs and flows. It's a dialectical process, guys. You may be in the bourgeoisie today, and then tomorrow you may be a proletariat, right? This isn't some stagnant entity, right? And so we need to point out the very insecure nature of capitalism for everyone, right? Let's make more universals. Let's make more universal claims. Let's try to point out something that isn't quite only specific to something. I think that is the best approach to emancipatory politics, right? Don't you guys think? I think. I don't know if there's arguments against that, but I think I think we would really benefit by talking about that more. But yeah, no, yeah. Pro-socialist members of the police. I mean, there's a lot of socialists who are in the military. Well, probably not a lot in the military, but were in the military. Yeah. I mean, I mean, you could be a socialist police officer. That, yeah. Most cops are right wing. Absolutely, though. Yeah, that's 100% the truth. Reminds me of when Zizek talks about universal plus and LGBTQ plus. Yeah, I mean, we guys, we should be very careful about how we approach individual politics, right? We got to be careful about that, you know? And I think means testing, right? Means approaching our political outreach is very bad. Very bad idea, I think. And the left does that very bad. We overly moralize people like the police. When the police are quite literally exploited all the time. They do a lot of, they work on the behalf and probably the most upfront way, right? Like, so, you know, someone who's working in a factory, the relation of a factory worker and a police officer is far different, mind you, right? The police is not an institution that's good, right? The police in general, it's quite not good. Very unbased, but yeah. Has way more potential to be radicalized than the police. Well, Yeah, maybe. But I mean, like, guys, the relationship between the police and the military are quite similar in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, the military, they're, oh my God, they're, talk about tools of the rich. God, they're some of the biggest tools of the rich, right? Police are as well, right? They are as well, but holy fuck, military people are, they have to kill innocent people. They have, so do the police. Like, truly, exploitation is something quite universal, and we need to point more of that out. Yeah, and this is another thing too. There is a sort of contradiction here as well. When you talk about the police and Russia, oh, if it is the USSR, everything, by definition that would be good, right? And we see that some people approach that with China, right, where the police in China, oh, nothing wrong with the police in China in a lot of ways. And that's not, we should be more again, in the left, we're not as specific as we should in a lot of ways. And we can qualify that more, but probably for another stream, be a little bit longer. Look, I'll be honest, I'm an extreme right-wing libertarian homosexual. Yes, I'm deeply conflicted. I'm deeply conflicted. The comedy is not lost on me. Are you saying, like, politically you're conflicted? Like, you don't know what to believe? If so, that's probably good. It's probably good. There's nothing wrong with that. They are sent to fight senseless wars, come back, get crap healthcare, absolutely 100%. PTSD, 100%. Cops break up protests, social movements, and exist to keep other working class in line. Yeah, I mean, but in the same vein, soldiers have to do that as well. In foreign countries, why do you think that they invaded foreign countries? To essentially, in so many ways, to allow a new order of global capitalism, right? So truly, the difference between military and police aren't quite that large. They operate in a different form, but the content's quite similar. It's, a class isn't about structural occupancy. Correct. It's relational and embodied. Where does the idea that someone can be a capitalist overnight come from? How? It's 100%. Well, yeah, and it's like class isn't something that's stagnant, right? And we need to point this out. And because it's not stagnant, we can point out the sheer, very insecure nature of capitalism, right? And in that sense, people are like, it's not in the rich's interest to overthrow capitalism. In many ways, it is. And we need to point that out. Some ways it's not, right? They benefit immensely from capitalism and exploiting workers. But in so many ways, not really. There's an insecure tonality. A lot of people who are bourgeoisie, who do own means of production, you can be on a finer ground than other capitalists, right? This is the thing, guys. And Engels talks about this a lot. Why capitalism fails immensely is because trusts are made, where other rich people outcompete other rich people, and they get consumed into the new, like, the bourgeoisie becomes more centralized. Talk about something that's hard on rich people, man. Or sorry, not rich people. I mean, rich isn't like bourgeoisie by definition, clearly, but like talk about like for other people in the bourgeoisie, it's a complete insecure structure, right? What percent of U.S. police force is ex-military? Probably quite a bit. We can't convince Jeff Bezos, and we shouldn't even try, but we may be able to convince smaller bourgeoisie who are less stable. Yeah, I think in some ways, I think the best thing to do is to not overly to come to overly moral conclusions about whether some person's evil or something like that. It is so much more complex. Are we class reductionist or intersectional Marxist here? Are we class reductionist? I think the idea of class reductionism is quite dumb in some ways. I think there's like the class is something that's quite universal. It's not, but class reductionist doesn't mean like people like, if my understanding, having a universal approach to class isn't like, it doesn't take away individual identity at all. I don't understand. Maybe I don't get the question. I don't really get class reductionism. Some people that say that's all some people claim to be. I don't see that with a lot of Marxists. Most Marxists I know, they completely recognize sexual orientation, individual class, or individual identity and stuff like that. I find that to be sometimes a straw man. Maybe not. There are probably some vulgar materialists that don't acknowledge that, and that's really stupid. But no, I do still find class to be an incredibly universal thing and a very concrete reality. You sound nerdy? Cool. That's great. Class reductionism equals slur invented by CIA legit. Maybe talking in vulgar Marxist terms that originated when trains were new is part of the problem. Yeah, in some ways, yeah, we haven't adjusted our language to we haven't adjusted because right, a lot of the older terminology actually represented something quite different. It represented a social order that was radically different than today. Yeah. This is the thing. The left we need to adapt. And listen, in so many ways, Marxists are not dialectical, right? And that's part of the problem, completely. It is in the interest of humans who happen to be bourgeoisie to overthrow capitalism, but not in their interest as a class if they want to, reproduce themselves as a. Well, no, I don't know. I don't think there's such a huge separation there, right? That might be a little bit of a false dichotomy. You're human. To be a human being is to operate within class confines or class relations, right? Make Marx dialectical again. Yeah, Marx was a dialectical thinker. He was not goddamn Marx. Talk about materialism. I'm reading the German ideology right now. This man does not like anything outside the confines of materialism. Marx is the original vulgar materialist, but yeah, no, Marx was a dialectical thinker for sure. I think in some ways Engels hammers that in more than Marx. But yeah. Oh. What are you talking about? Talking about stuff, talking about theory, talking about philosophy. Okay. Question: do capitalists have a point when talking about rewarding risk? Under capitalist, individually owned companies where one person has invested much of their capital, isn't it kind of not? Huh. No, I might no. Oh God, that's a hard question. That's a good question though. That's a good question. Okay, I think just exploitation in general, right? We got to be careful, right? So there can be a utilitarian might be a problem with utilitarianism is it might justify kind of shitty things in the present more than it should, maybe that might be a more utilitarian approach, right? Is it morally condemnable for people to recoup their investment? Is there risk in capitalism? Yeah, 100%. But that's part of the problem with capitalism in some ways. But is it morally condemnable for them to exploit workers? Yeah, probably. I just don't think exploiting workers in any context really quite just kind of sucks, you know. That's a very broad and very difficult question, but exploitation in general sucks. Sorry, this is irrelevant, but please don't pronounce Engels as Angles. Angels? Angles? I don't. What? I don't even know how to pronounce that. Okay. I don't mean to be picky. Are you talking about me? Hi, I'm back. Grad articles to dense. Gotcha. Right wingers don't moralize. Yeah, we got to be a little bit more careful about that. All right, guys. I think that's actually it. I appreciate all you. Mateo. LOL. Yeah, seriously, Mateo. Thank you so much for the $10. David. Thank you for the $13. I appreciate all you guys so much. I think I'm going to go ahead and take off. Guys, I'm almost done with the system of objects. Kind of why I'm cutting this short. I would stay on stream more. I want to get this video out. Video is very close. Very, very close to being done. So if you guys want to support, feel free. Join Patreon down below. A couple dollars a month, get you some perks. I started making tutorials on our $10 tier if you guys want to learn how to video edit, stuff like that. I try to give back as much as I can. That's a really good way to support through YouTube membership. The join button or Patreon helps an absolute ton, keeps all of this alive. Thank you guys, but more than anything, thank you guys for being here. It was super fun to talk to Matt, super fun to talk to you guys. Genuinely appreciate all of you from the bottom of my heart. So I will see you guys later.